opens that door up now for us.
Right.
We have to consider it. Intention, it hasn't changed. In other words, that this death was not intended is not changed by this. But the fact that they do, or he does, in his language, focus so much on time, we must now be open to the possibility that he has a confidence about this time frame because it happened at a different time frame. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
What he's doing is he's affirming every other point of analysis. So when I said earlier that we look at little point here, little point there, he's now summed it up for us. The reason why this father does not show any concern about what Madeline is going through is because Madeline is beyond experiencing anything that he would need to be concerned about. Mm-hmm. They hid her body.
Right.
That's what they did, according to his language. But I don't think we should dismiss quickly that he introduced falling. Mm-hmm. She was very tired, Kate said. Mm-hmm. They had left her for their own. And so he asked the question, why would we cover this up? Mm-hmm. And the answer is quite simple. We have professional people who have 2 other children, an unintentional death. You're going to lose custody of the children.
Mm-hmm. Another motive might be if there had been signs of abuse.
Yes.
That would come up in a, with the hospital.
In the inquiry, sure. Yeah. He, as a medical professional, in any way, they are very likely to have knowledge of child abuse because it's just part of that profession where they deal with that. Now we have some indications there that would need much further exploration for possible sexual abuse. And there is a risk of the consequences for an unintended death, that's number 1. Risk of losing the other children, number 2. And then as you point out, when Child Protective Services sends in a professional to investigate, every case is explored for sexual abuse, whether there's allegations or not. All indicators of all possible abuses are explored for. Neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse are going to be explored for in every case. Because we have some linguistic indicators, which could be them as parents, it could be them as abusers, it could be him as an abuser, it could be her failure to protect. We have to explore for it. Right. The consequences could go on more than just losing custody of the twins. Mm-hmm. It could be loss of freedom. Yeah. When a guilty person asks questions, they're floating out alibis, they're looking to see what sounds plausible. And in his question, he says, well, when did she have the accident, not a accident, the accident, and died? The only time she was left unattended was when we were at dinner, so, which is establishing his alibi. If she died then, how could we have disposed of hidden her body? Now, it's interesting, when some people ask questions like that, they don't always get the answers they want to hear. We had here in the United States a baseball player who was accused of using performance-enhancing drugs named Roger Clemens. And under oath he said, if I have all these performance-enhancing drugs, it would mean that someone supplied them. Who is this? Who supplied them? I wish he would come forward. So he asked who supplied them, and then he made a wish. The man who supplied him with performance-enhancing drugs came forward and fulfilled his wish and testified against him. So by asking a question, they're trying to portray it as if it's not plausible while they're giving out information and admitting what happened. Mm-hmm. This is an embedded confession and statement analysis. This is not the quote of someone else accusing them. This is what was purported to come out from Portugal. What he's saying to you is Portugal police know. So they may make various statements, but the investigators on the ground, if we were to talk to them, the ones that first responded, they would tell you exactly what they feel about this case, and I think it would be right here, mm-hmm. that it's a cover-up.
And that gets even more ludicrous, that we've obviously hidden her somewhere incredibly well, where nobody's found her.
I believe what she's telling me. I believe that, first of all, the word obvious means to accept without question, and I am following it. That we've obviously, it's obvious to, and this is a concern of hers, that people recognize they've hidden her somewhere incredibly well where nobody's found her. Now, consider this. This is supposed to be from a mother of a missing child who is spending a lot of time defending herself, trying to ridicule the accusations, instead of pleading for her safe return and talking about what she's going through. Again, there is no concern for what Madeline is going through by biological parents, close relatives, the closest relatives.
And we had her so well that we then decided we'd move her in the car, which we hired weeks later. And, you know, it's just ridiculous.
So now we have a change of language from ludicrous to ridiculous. We have a car entering her language, and the timing is not lost on us either. She now says weeks later. So if someone was concerned that the death took place at a different time, she's now saying, you've got a good idea to be concerned about that. She's playing with the time. So to narrow down the time frame to what they want us to think it is would not be a wise investigatory move. We'd have to be open to other time here.
Does that include the death occurring before their stated time, the time they say Madeline was abducted?
It has to go beyond the time that they state. It has to,
Right.
because their words are guiding, at least from my perspective as a statement analyst. They're not locking in a time frame. By choosing 3 weeks is to deliberately blur. It's kind of a joke, but it's a statistical point, is that when someone is going to choose a number and they need to lie about it, they often will cling to number 3. 2 sounds too small, 4 sounds too big, and it's one of those statistical patterns.
They did hire a car after they'd reported her missing a few weeks after. So that's what she's referring to there. And there was evidence found in the car.
Yes.
Of a cat of a dog evidence, I believe.
Yep. The point being is that as she even goes to this area, she's changing the time frame for us.
Right.
So even if 3 is accurate,
Right.
it's still fascinating that she is now moving the time away from what they originally said.
Right.
So it's sensitive to her.
Right, I see.
When you come back to Portugal, do you feel closer to Madeline?
And although I don't know where Madeline is, that is the last place that, you know, I saw her and held her, and I guess there's a part of me that still feels connected to her there. So.
This was an interesting question, and I thought for an interview that I did not think very highly of, this was a fascinating question that grabbed my attention. And I think the interviewer might be probing for what we actually get here. Is her answer is important. Although I don't know where Madeline is, no one accused you of that. So before she even gets to her emotion, she has a need to deny that she knows where Madeline is. You know what that tells me? She knows where Madeline is.
Right.
That she's actually affirming that we hid her incredibly well. These 2 smart people who were in panic mode for themselves hid her incredibly well. So although I don't know where Madeline is, we call that the negation. She wants us to know what she doesn't know. Very sensitive. And then she uses the phrase, you know. And what we do with any type of habit of speech is we look where it comes up and where it doesn't come up. And it shows an acute awareness of the interviewer. So we notice what topics will provoke that, what topics do not provoke it. And about the location of Madeline, it provoked it. Then she says, and I think this is important, I saw her, held her. Now, in order to hold her, you have to see her. Seeing her is unnecessary. People speak that way about dead people, about dead family members. Because in order to hold her, you have to see her, unless you held a dead body. I think that when Madeline's lifeless body was carried, Kate held her. I think she's telling the truth.
I think kids can be written off, you know, missing kids can be written off too easily. You cannot do that. You cannot give up on a child.
This is the mother of a missing child utterly avoiding the call to find her child, utterly avoiding the call to attention of what Madeline is suffering through. Instead, this is extreme distancing. I don't want Madeline written off, I want her found. No, kids, general can be written off. You know, again, that awareness of the interviewer. Missing kids, no, my Madeline. Missing kids can be written off. This is someone who has well moved beyond in the grieving stage. She has well processed the information. Madeline's not coming home, and she's at peace with it now. This is a distancing language of kids, child. The use of the word child there again is something that, we don't say kid abuser, kid molester. We say child abuse, child molester. This use of the word child, although it's not conclusory by itself, with the other indicators, causes me to be concerned that Madeline was a victim of child abuse inside that home. I don't know for certain. There are certain things that I do and can say that with a strong conclusion. That's an element that must be explored.
Right. Just as an aside, Peter, are you aware of what we call the Gasper statements? This was statements that a family or a couple made against the McCanns not long after it happened. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay. Oh, perhaps I can show you that at some point. But they had been on holiday with the McCanns about a year earlier, or at a previous time. They were sat around the dinner table, and the wife was in between Jerry and Jerry's friend, and Jerry was discussing with David Payne. He said something like, he actually said, it was David Payne said, "Would Madeline do this?" And he put his finger in his mouth and moved it in and out while circling his nipple. Okay. Yeah. David Payne said, and Jerry didn't seem fazed by that question. Yeah. So after this couple found out,
we're more fazed by the question. My own reaction to that.
Yeah, yeah. So after this couple found out that that this case was going on, they went to Leicestershire Police and reported this. In fact, they wouldn't allow their child to be bathed by either Jerry or David Payne after they heard this, because that was another thing, that they've spent time bathing each other's children. Okay, which I don't know if that's normal. I don't think it is. But them going to report that in the UK was withheld. The British police didn't send it to the Portuguese police investigation until the lead investigator had been sacked. So that only surfaced, and the Portuguese new investigation team ignored it because we think there's a political decision being made to pull the investigation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just to point that there's other statement evidence that Jerry might be involved in abuse, even though you've not even seen that.
Right. The concerns are in the language, and I didn't know that. Right. But they're in the language. They rely upon an infant's natural sucking mechanism of survival. Right. That's one of the methods of sexual exploitation of a child. So right. that motion that he made.
Right.
That would certainly fit into the language then.
Kids are survivors.
Jerry says kids are survivors. He doesn't tell us Madeline's a survivor. He follows the same vein. What they're doing is psychologically they're gone. They're distancing themselves from Madeline. That she doesn't exist. And in the statement, and this is why it's so important to consider, it's not just that they show no concern about Madeline. We have to enter into their language. We have to go into their world. The reason they're not concerned about Madeline is because she's beyond concern. She doesn't exist any longer. So it's natural for them to talk about kids being survivors and kids doing this, or you feeling that, or you feeling this, because they've already processed it. Mm-hmm. It's gone.
Madeline means tower of strength. Wherever she is, whoever she's been with, whatever's happened, we will get her through it.
Okay, my transcript says, Madeline means tower of strength. Wherever she was, whoever she's been with, whatever's happened, we will get her through it. Several things. She doesn't tell us that Madeline is a tower of strength. She doesn't say that she has any strength. She doesn't show any detailed concern for Madeline. And she says, we will get her through it, which is a form of passivity. After saying Madeline, the name means strength, but we will get her through it. There's a disconnect there in language, which is more narrative storytelling, almost poetic. We'd find that on a card of someone well after death.
You will not rest until you find your daughter, until you wrap your arms around her.
Why do they say such things? As a journalist, why feed information to a subject that way? Makes no sense.
I don't believe any parent could, and I don't believe we could ever reach a point where we just think, oh, well, we've done everything now. Whilst the situation remains as it is, Madeline's out there and she needs us to find her.
You'll keep looking forever.
We will.
This is, again, another indication that the processing of information has been complete. She tells us what she doesn't believe, tells us what doesn't happen. I don't believe any parent could, and I don't believe we ever could, reach a point, and this is her language, I believe her, we just think, oh well, we've done everything now. I think that we've hidden her incredibly well. We've done everything now. Her death wasn't intended. We've moved on. So while Madeline's plight, while Madeline's pain, while Madeline's suffering is there, no, while the situation remains. It's a situation. Madeline is no longer part of the picture. There's a situation, and those in situation involved in it are she and her husband. For them, it's a situation. It is not a trauma. This is very soft language. The situation remains. Not Madeline's not been found. And Madeline's out there. Do you notice that she avoids saying anything about the person that has her or the people that have her? So not only do we not have any connection, but even if they had been guided by law enforcement, they would be speaking to the kidnappers. They would be seeking to provoke empathy or some reason to bring her back. No, she's just out there in the passive voice. That again is another indication they're not concerned. Madeline's beyond the need of their concern. What's the last thing she says? She needs us to find her. You keep looking forever. Okay? And I can't help but wonder if the interviewer thought they're going to be like what we call the O.J. Simpson searching for the real killer. O.J. said he was going to search for the rest of his life for the real killer. He had no confidence it was going to happen any time before that.
Right.
Instead of saying we're going to search until she's found, it's just going to be, we'll keep looking, forever.
Yeah. You mention baby Ayla here, Peter, in relation to this. Baby Ayla, A-Y-L-A.
Yes.
Have you mentioned that?
Baby Ayla, not in an interview here, but
right.
in the analysis.
Right. Okay. Do you want to mention that now?
Sure. Baby Ayla was in Waterville, Maine, and she was reported kidnapping by her father. And the father was not cooperating with police, and the family was the mother, because they're not married, was trying to get the father to speak. And she finally told media that the father is not cooperating with police. This got a response from him. Liars are always concerned about their reputation. He said, contrary to rumors floating around out there, I have been cooperating with police. And so with the phrase, rumors floating around out there, is a strong indication that baby's in water. And that's where the searching went on. He had, was asked, how did you do on your polygraph? He had been accused of low-level drug dealing, child abuse, other things. He answered, I smoked it. I smoked it. So we give ourselves away by the words that we choose. And there is like almost like a junior high school student talking about a test. I smoked my math test. It's a missing child. He referenced her in the past tense. He never showed concern at any given time for anything that the child may have been experiencing. All his concern was about himself. This is the same of the McCanns. It's very similar. And when we listen to people and follow their language, and their concern is making sure they ridicule instead of deny any possibility of their involvement, that's what their priority is. But we went through this interview, and not once did I hear a single word of human empathy expressed for Madeline. Not once. Madeline is the victim. And if the deception was to be believed, someone had Madeline. And was she wearing a warm coat on a cool night? Anything, even the slightest bit of concern, none of that is in their radar because it's not in their hearts. It's not in their minds. It's not in their minds because they know that Madeline is beyond all help. What I concluded from just this interview itself is that Madeline is dead. The death was not intentional. That they have disposed of her remains in a hidden manner of which they feel confident will not be found. The cause of death was